Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to poker tournament strategy. Now here's your host, Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. I'm your host, Clayton Fletcher, and I am in fabulous Las Vegas. Not for very much longer, though, as my flight will be leaving back to New York very soon. I want to wish you all happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, any other holiday that you may be celebrating this time of year. I hope that you are with family, friends, loved ones, and anyone else who makes you feel really special this holiday season. Well, Las Vegas has not made me feel very special on this trip. I only ended up playing in 2 tournaments. I believe I mentioned both of them on last week's episode. So the first was the $1,100 Prime Championship with a $5 million guarantee that actually went over $9 million when all was said and done. So they blew that one out of the water. I also played in 1 satellite to the WPT Championship main event, the 10K, that also featured a 25-seat guarantee for people to get into the $5 million free roll. That was the most enticing thing that brought me to Vegas in the first place. And I bricked everything. And after that, I decided that I was getting a little bit frustrated about tournaments. Maybe I had a lot of FOMO going on, watching so many people that I know getting to play in that once-in-a-lifetime free roll opportunity with $1 million up top. So I decided to stick to cash games for the rest of my trip. And even that didn't go that well. I did have a few winning sessions, but all in all, it was a losing trip to Vegas to end what has been a pretty bad poker year for me. I am absolutely ready to turn the page on 24 and start fresh next year. And to help me do that, our friends at the World Series of Poker have announced the actual dates for the 25 WSOP, which are May 27th through July 16th. Now, nothing else is clear except that the last day of the series this year coincides with the last day of the main event, which I believe is a change. I feel like in recent years, there has been a number of post-lims, as some people call them, after the main event. So it should be interesting to see how the full schedule looks when it comes out. Usually that happens sometime in February or at the latest in March. But of course, I will be waiting from now until that happens with bated breath, because it's the one thing that I look forward to the most every single year. There's nothing like summer in Vegas. I've said it before, and I will say it again. Now, before I get into the poker today, I want to plug a few stand-up comedy dates that I have coming up. If you're anywhere near Washington, D.C., I'm going to be headlining in Gaithersburg, Maryland at Give a Hoot Comedy Club Christmas weekend, December 27th and 28th. On New Year's Eve, December 31st at 8 p.m. and 10 p.m., you can find me at West Side Comedy Club in New York City, westsidecomedyclub.com for tickets there. And on January 16th, I am headlining for the first time ever in Denver at the Improv, the Denver Improv, January 16th. I hope you guys can come out and catch me on stage. There's a link in the description. You can click it and buy tickets to come and see me perform. All right, so let's move on. I want to do something a little bit different today. I just want to talk about some hands that have appeared on recent episodes that we didn't really get to analyze with the help of GTO Wizard. Because I've had so many guests and I don't really want to analyze hands with the wizard and the guest all at once, because that gets a little bit difficult. So I want to go back and look at some hands that have been discussed here on the podcast. And this time we're going to use my favorite tool, GTO Wizard. By the way, this week they announced something called Hand History Analyzer 2.0. It is a very sophisticated poker training tool, a revamped interface, advanced stats, customizable filters. You can filter like what date you may have played the tournament. This is when you upload your hand histories from whatever your online poker site of choice happens to be and let the wizard do the rest. So many powerful upgrades within this tool where you can really sort of take a macro view of your poker and see where do you normally make the most mistakes. Is it early in the tournament? Is it on the river? Is it around the bubble? Do you make more mistakes when the mystery bounties kick in? You can actually customize this Analyzer 2.0 thingy for your needs and to help you find holes and leaks in your game and come up with ways to plug them. Best of all, Analyzer 2.0 is included in every possible GTO Wizard subscription. So if you're interested in trying this thing out, guys, click the link in the description. That's our affiliate link, and you can get 24 hours free, unlimited access to all of GTO Wizard's features. And then after that 24 hours is up, if you're ready to buy, you will save 10% because you click that link. So that's the best way to try this thing out. And also, it gives us a little bit of recognition and encourage GTO Wizard to continue sponsoring the podcast. So that link is gtowizard.com/p/TPE. All right, so I want to go back and look at a hand from almost a month ago. Alex Fitzgerald was my guest on November 22nd, and he brought a really cool blind versus blind hand from a $500 live tournament that he had played in, I believe it may have been a circuit stop somewhere along the way, but I can't recall. It's been too long since we recorded this episode, but I still have the hand, and I'm sure about the hand. So the blinds were 1,000 and 1,500 with a 1,500 big blind ante, and the effective stack for the hand is 80K, so about 53 big blinds. And Alex was in the small blind holding the jack of clubs, 8 of clubs in an unopened pot. So he's in the small blind. He decided to make it 3x. So he went to 4,500 from the small blind and the big blind. And Alex did describe the big blind as being a very loose, non-folding type of player. To no one's surprise, that player called the raise. And so Alex is going to see a flop from out of position with the jack 8 suited from the small blind versus a big blind caller. And let's look at what the wizard has to say about this open raise. I thought that I might normally limp in here. I believe that I limp in from the small blind a lot more often than most players, and certainly more often than the solver recommends. Like a balanced strategy is you sometimes limp, you sometimes raise, and I don't have enough open raises in my overall strategy, but it's basically by design. I mean, typically the opponents that I'm facing, especially online, are the type that like to attack whenever they sense even a modest amount of weakness. And so for that reason, I like to limp with lots of hands, small, big, strong, weak, and just limp and hope that they often raise because I have a very robust 3-betting range when I limp in from the small blind. So I don't need to have a premium hand to put in that 3-bet. I actually want you to raise me so that I can hopefully take the pot away from you with my bluffs or build an even bigger pot with my monsters. But that's not exactly a GTO strategy, guys. That is a Clayton exploitative strategy based on the tendencies of the player pool against which I mostly find myself playing. But getting back to Alex, the solver is 50-50 between limping in with the jack 8 suited and raising with it. And so obviously Alex's play to raise with it is totally fine, but the solver actually prefers a bigger sizing from out of position here, making it 3.5x. So rather than 4,500, the solver would have said 5,200. Not a huge difference, but over time, those little sizing differences do add up and make quite an impact on the bottom line. So now with 10,500 in the middle, the flop comes 10 of clubs, 5 of spades, deuce of hearts, 10-5 deuce rainbow, and Hero has the jack 8 of clubs. So he's got 3 to a straight flush. And I remember thinking we could check raise this. And you absolutely can. The solver has a very wide mix with the jack 8 of clubs. I mean, honestly, there's nothing you can do that the solver would say is wrong. It checks 12.5% of the time, Actually, overbet is preferred, betting 10 big blinds into the 8 big blind pot, which is, pretty big bet on the flop, especially when you only start with 53 blinds in the first place. You're supposed to put in 10 of them here on the flop 37% of the time. Let's see what the solver thinks about Alex's play, betting half the pot, about 4 big blinds, 15.3%. So it is, like I said, a wide mix. You can do almost anything you want, but the solver seems to prefer usually over betting on this board. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of credit here because my idea was let's try to build a pot on this flop, expecting to barrel quite often on 4th Street. And when we do, always shove the river, whether we get there or not. So I would barrel any card that gave me a flush draw or a straight draw or top pair having check raised. So if we're betting 10, it's kind of the same thing. Obviously, we're not going to bet 10 into 8 on the flop and then give up on a turn that improves our hand or gives us more equity, right? So obviously that's what the solver has in mind here. The solver generally loves having 3 to a straight flush on any flop because those are the kinds of flops where you can start planning a big bluff on the turn and river on a very wide range of runouts. So yeah, Alex's play is also totally GTO Wizard approved. So let's look at the turn. So he bets 5K into 10K and the villain called. So now with 20,000 in the middle, the turn comes the Queen of Clubs, one of those magical cards that gives us now 4 to a straight flush. Always love that. And Alex fires 20,000 into the 20,000 pot. So a pot-sized bet on the turn. Wizard loves it, betting big on the turn, either a little more than the pot or just under the pot, a full 78% of the time between those two. 38% of the over bet and 40% of the slightly under pot size bet. So I'm going to give Alex a full double check mark here because he absolutely nailed this one. And the villain folded. So let's move on to the week after that. I talked with my friend Nikki Limo, who had just come back from London, played in the Women's Poker Festival or whatever they called it, where it was just, ladies only. So she was in the main event there. It was early. She had basically just bought in. She had 60 big blinds. The blinds were 200 and 300 with a 300 big blind ante. And Nikki had about 18,000 in her stack. The low jack opened to 600. The hijack called and the cutoff called. And Nikki was on the button with the King of Diamonds, 8 of Diamonds. And Nikki chose to make it 2,400 or 8 big blinds. I remember saying that I wanted to make it more like 13 big blinds to give us a chance to take it down, because do we necessarily want to see a flop with 3 opponents when we've just got the King 8 suited? I also thought it would be totally fine to fold this hand. But let's see what the Wizard has to say. Yeah, sure enough, the King 8 suited, all combos of King 8 suited are pure fold. So Nikki was a little bit out of line, but not by much, guys. The Ace 10 is a pure 3-bet, as is the King 10 and the Jack 10. The suited, that is. Ace 10 suited, King 10 suited, Jack 10 suited are all part of the solver's 3-betting range. And the sizing that is preferred by GTO Wizard is actually 9.3 big blinds. So somewhere in between where Nikki was and my big overbet is what the solver prefers. But again, we don't do this with King 8 suited. We also don't do it with Ace 9 suited or King 9 suited or Queen 10 suited or Ace Jack offsuit. Those are all folds. Pocket 7s, guys, also a fold according to GTO Wizard, which I found very surprising. I feel like I'm always overcalling with my 7s, 6s, even deuces. I would probably set mine now that it's looking like it's about to be a pretty big pot. But the thing is, guys, and this was a big shock to me, there are no calls. I think at one point in this episode with Nikki, I said I felt like overcalling on the button would be totally fine. You're going to see a multi-way flop. Maybe you'll, get lucky, flop a flush or something like that. Well disguised 2-pair. Nobody could put you on King 8, obviously. But yeah, we're not supposed to be doing this with any hands, no calling at all, according to the GTO Wizard strategy. Now, the hands that go all in are ace-queen suited, king-queen suited, king-jack suited just a little bit of the time, queen-jack suited all the time, pocket jacks, pocket tens half the time, ace-king offsuit all the time, ace-queen offsuit half the time. Now, guys, you're never going to be able to memorize. Like, you're looking at when I have 60 big blinds and it goes raise, call, call. What am I supposed to have in my 3-betting range? But just to give you an idea, what the solver wants to do in this spot is never overcall on the button against this action and basically have a very tight 3-betting range, whether you're 3-betting normally to 9.3 big blinds or you're shoving and just sticking that whole 60 right in there and let them figure it out from there. I just don't know that I would ever do that with queen jack suited, but that's what you're supposed to do in this spot with all combos of queen jack suited. I am shocked. I mean, you talk about a big squeeze. That's a big squeeze. There's only 8.5 big blinds in there, and I'm supposed to stick the entire 18,000 right in the middle with queen jack suited to win that 2,600. That's why we have GTO Wizard to teach us these strategies that we never would have thought of ourselves, but these are unexploitable, theoretically optimal plays. Obviously, food for thought there. Let's do one more. We can't really do anything else with Nikki's hand because the solver isn't going to deal with when you 3-bet to 8 and then you get everybody called. You know, the solver doesn't do that yet when you're seeing like 5 people are taking a flop. So we've got to move on. Let's do one more hand from our dear friend Derek Killing Bird Tenbusch, who played in an online mystery bounty tournament with a buy-in of $16.50 and got all the way down to the final 45 players. Blinds were 30,000 and 60,000. Derek had 1.6 million, so right around 25 big blinds, and most of the players at the table were in that same range, with the notable exception, 3 to his left, of probably the tournament overall chip leader with over 5 million. Derek has the ace of spades, 4 of spades, ace 4 suited in the hijack, and he opens for the minimum. Solver loves it, 100%. Only the big blind called now, guys. So we're going to be heads up in position, facing a big blind caller in a single raised pot. As a side note, real quick, Derek did have some HUD stats on this guy, over 150 hands on him, and he was running 15-10 with a 9% 3-bet, which is a very tight, very aggressive range, especially that 3-betting number. So that's worth noting, although GTO Wizard would not be considering that. But this might be a good hand to look at what the solver wants to do against an unknown opponent and what Derek might want to do differently, knowing what he does know about the caller. So at that point, the pot is 390K and the flop comes ace of clubs, 8 of clubs, 5 of diamonds, and the big blind checked. And Derek checked behind and didn't know why. You may recall on that episode, Derek was saying normally he plays a pretty straight ahead style when he's streaming because he's also dealing with the chat and he's got many tables up and he's doing a lot of different things. So he doesn't usually get too tricky while he's streaming a hand. But for some reason, he did check back here. Let's see what the solver thinks about this seemingly unusual play on a board of ace of clubs, 8 of clubs, 5 of diamonds, hero with top pair, no kicker, and no backdoor flush draw, only checks it back less than 1% of the time. 0.8% of the time to be exact. So I'm going to give Derek an X on that play because it's so rare. It's a very, very low frequency play. And I don't think it's too hard to figure out why. I mean, look, so many turn cards can hurt us. We're not going to be happy to see a club. We're not going to be happy to see a 9 or a 4 because those are straight cards. A tray or a deuce could also be bad. There's just so many turn cards we don't want to let our opponents see for free. And yes, I realize that a 4 would give us 2 pair, but what good does that do if our opponent has 7-6 suited and the card that gives me 2 pair gives him the nuts? I hate that situation, especially when I start with only 25 big blinds. I prefer to play my hands a lot more decisively, and the solver agrees with me, betting some amount on this flop at least 99% of the time. But we did check it back. And so now we're in low frequency land, and the turn comes the 5 of hearts. So the board was ace 8 5 5 with 2 clubs, and the big blind checks once again. This time Derek does bet, but he only bet a quarter pot. He put in 100K into a pot of 390, and the big blind called. Now, when the solver takes this line, which again is very rarely, less than 1% of the time, but when we get here on the turn, the solver loves betting 1/4 of the pot 60% of the time and no other sizing, and the rest is just a check. So we're either betting a quarter or we're checking. So you got to give Derek credit because he made the perfect play on the turn. Although checking, having checked the flop, is also all right, which I think I will do that sometimes, not on such a wet board, but I will check back with top pair all the way to the very end and then finally put a bet out there. And many times my opponents will call. It's much easier for people to call a river bet than it is for them to call a turn bet with not much, because on the turn they have to worry that you could fire again on the river. And at the end, they know they can just call and see what the heck I have. So that is something I do semi-regularly, and that's what the solver wants to do here, checking back. On the rare occasion we check the flop, we can check the turn 40% of the time. Very interesting. And then on the river, it was the Jack of Hearts, and the big blind checked again. Derek put out 140, and that was into a 590 pot, and the villain shoved enough to force Derek to have to call all in, and Derek folded. I remember I didn't like this fold. I didn't really know what the heck this guy was doing, and it seemed out of character given that he's a 15-10-9 kind of guy HUD-wise. But when something makes this little sense, I just usually give action because it just doesn't make sense. So it's probably a bluff. I guess that's my logic, and also the logic of GTO Wizard, which is actually more based in math instead of vibes like I rely on. But yeah, it is a call. It's a pure 100% call. So if you bet small and get shoved on in this spot, you are supposed to call 100% of the time with the ace-4 suited. But I think I want to look at this again because, Derek does have a read on this guy. He doesn't think that this player is totally out of line. He's very tight. He's very selective about which hands he chooses to play. And this is over a somewhat significant sample size. So there is a case to be made. But you know what, guys? These aggression numbers are pretty high. 15 with a 10, and especially that 9% 3-bet just lets me know this guy has the moves. He's not afraid to put in a 3-bet or possibly a check raise bluff on the river. And I just think, and I said this with Derek, I felt like ace-4 suited, it's not that great, but it's too strong to fold when it just doesn't make any sense. So GTO Wizard does confirm my theory of that hand. That'll do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and it was fun to kind of look back using this fantastic tool and get some artificial intelligence perspective, I guess, on hands that have recently been discussed here on the world's longest running poker strategy podcast. And for everyone here at Tournament Poker Edge, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Happy holidays, and thank you so much for listening.
I wanna hold them like they do in Texas Plays. Fold them, let them hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Lock in intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Can't read mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Can't read mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Poker face, poker face. Poker face, poker face. I wanna roll with her, a hard pair we will be. While little gambling is fun when you're with me. I love it. Russian roulette is not the same without a gun. And baby, when it's love, it's not rough, it isn't fun.